Coming up next, Maine Challenge this week with organizers from People First Portland, who passed referendum in Portland that is going to change life in that city. Join us. All right, well, good morning and welcome to the Maine Challenge. I am Betsy Sweet. I am your host this week, and I am thrilled to be joined by two of my heroines and amazing organizers in the state of Maine, Kate Sykes and Burnett. And they are both people who have been volunteers with People First Portland. This past November, People First Portland put out a referendum package of a whole number of a series of issues that were going to affect life for people in Portland to make it better. It included raising the minimum wage, emergency hazard pay. It included banning facial surveillance. It included the Green New Deal, making sure that there was tenant protection and rent control, and then issues dealing with Airbnb and short-term rentals. So they did an incredible job, and I am thrilled to have you here. It's so amazing the work that you did and the success that you had. And I think it means a lot for what's going on in this, not only in Portland, but in the state. So thank you for joining us. And I'd love it I'd like to turn it over to you. And Kate, if you want to just introduce yourself a little more, tell us a little more about you and why you got into this and why you got involved with these referenda.
Thanks, Betsy. I'm really happy to be here today to talk about this. It's been a really exciting time. So my name is Kate Sykes, and I'm a volunteer organizer with People First Portland. I'm also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. I came on board with that organization several years ago when the chapter was first formed here in Portland. And at the time that this referenda was conceived, I was the co-chair of the chapter. So kind of grew out of that. I no longer hold a leadership position within the chapter. I am just a rank and file member. And also I'm a freelance editor and writer. I specialize in editing long fiction and do all kinds of things in my freelance life, as most freelancers have to do. It's a little bit of a hustle.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. And Em, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Burnett. I'm a volunteer as well with People First Portland, and I have been an aspiring DSA member for a while, like many millennials. And I was thrilled to join in the spring, kind of after the effort was already getting underway, and being able to pitch in and kind of use some of my skills and organizing campaigns. Professionally, I do a lot of digital media and online communications. And it's been wonderful to kind of build something together with a large group. Like, we're two of many leaders, and we're trying to build something new in Portland. So it's been really inspiring to actually have success.
Yeah, and you guys had incredible success. Now, out of all the referendums, they all passed except for the short-term rental one. Is that accurate? Yeah. Correct. So why don't you just run down what the ones that passed are and what changes they're going to bring to Portland?
Yeah. Do you want to go? We can go on off. We've done this before. Yeah. So the first one is Measure A is minimum wage. So gradually increasing the minimum wage in the city of Portland to $15 an hour, and also immediately having a hazard pay, which would mandate that workers, some of whom are already receiving hazard pay, make $18 an hour during declared states of emergency, such as a global pandemic. So that is ongoing. A lot of businesses are complying, and workers are making the money that they deserve right now for risking their lives.
Great.
So
and we'll talk more about that, but let's keep going just so we get them all out.
Yeah, so question B was an act to ban facial surveillance. And the background on this is that the city council passed what is essentially the guts of this over the summer. And after delaying for several years, this was something that Councilor Pius Ali had brought forward. They passed it, however, they stripped it of all of its enforcement provisions. And so this was a way to make sure that we could actually enforce the ban on facial surveillance technology. So this is just for the government. If, you know, private entities can still use this technology, but this is essentially saying that police and government agencies cannot use this technology, which has been shown to be extremely racist, and it also misidentifies women at a very high rate as well. And so this makes it so that our privacy is protected here in Portland. Sends a clear message beyond Portland to state that we will not stand for this type of technology used.
Awesome, great.
Measure C is a Green New Deal for Portland, and this is a comprehensive package. It essentially, voters are saying with this measure that if the city of Portland is going to be subsidizing housing, that housing that we build, that so-called affordable housing, has to the workers who build it need to be paid a prevailing wage. There's part of that also encourages the use of apprenticeships, so training the next generation of workers. And it increases a lot of the efficiency standards for the buildings, as well as monitoring fossil fuel infrastructure in the city of Portland. So like the National Green New Deal, this is tying in labor and environmental efficiencies.
Wow, great.
And so Measure D is an act to protect tenants. It is essentially a rent control ordinance, which we tried to pass in, I believe it was 2017 here in Portland. Very different electorate at that time. It did fail. And I think this time there was much more understanding about where we're at with rents in the city and the housing crisis here. So it passed overwhelmingly this time. It basically bans income discrimination. So now tenants that have Section 8, that is something that they can feel confident going forward and getting a rental apartment. And then it also caps rents to the rate of inflation, and it makes it so that rents can only be increased once a year, so an annual rent increase rather than happening several times. And then it also establishes a rent board, which is a citizen board that's appointed by the city council. It's made up of both landlords and renters, and they are there to hear issues that come up, such as improper evictions or improper rent increases, and to try to mediate those in a way that is sort of the first step before having to go to court. So it's a support system for both landlords and renters to be able to talk over issues and come to some agreements on them.
Awesome, that's great.
Yeah, and Measure E, I guess we can call that one the one that got away. Very close margin on that. It only lost by somewhere around 200 votes. And Measure E would cap, or actually limit non-owner occupied short-term rentals, which, as we know from looking at our housing market, essentially these short-term rentals are taking away rentals, units that would otherwise be apartments. And so that would be limiting that. And I think there's still a need to work on this, hopefully with the new council, or take it back to the ballot box.
Right, yeah, like that's the Airbnb folks, and so many people are buying buildings and then just using it for that and taking away the housing stock. So, wow. Well, so that's an incredible package of, and it's funny, I was gonna say progressive things, but actually, I'm in the mode right now of they're not progressive. Those are the things that real people need everyday lives. And clearly the fact that you won on all of these, I think, shows that people on the street, the political pundits call them things, but people on the street are like, oh, no, we need more housing. We need rent. Oh, we need a living wage. Oh, we need hazard pay. Oh, we need to make sure that our privacy is protected. It's like, I call it common sense, and so I think that, it's a way to try and dismiss it, to call it progressive or even radical or social. I mean, you're right, you guys know all the buzzwords. So it's an amazing package. And I know that that you had some really strong opposition. Now, so talk a little bit about what you faced in terms of the opposition, and was it financial organizing? Was it particularly related to one of the issues, or was it them as a package? What did you face? Who came out against this?
Do you want to start with that?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this was almost $1 million that the
Wow.
opposition spent. And to give you a sense, I think we were more in the $25,000, $30,000 range. Excuse me. The opposition, it kind of varied. So we had the Chamber of Commerce opposing minimum wage. We had really no concerted opposition to facial surveillance ban, mostly because companies can't make gobs of money from that one yet. Measure C, D, and E all had concerted opposition as well. So we had kind of the real estate industry really mobilizing to oppose measures C and D, so the Green New Deal and tenant protections in particular. They were most angry about the Green New Deal. That one struck
Because
a
they don't want
nerve.
to, they don't want to pay prevailing wage, they don't want affordable housing, they don't want to have to meet a climate standard or a, green building standard, all of the above.
Kate was very I think has some good observations there. But when I say struck a nerve, I think we're on like revealing what is present in our housing industry and the affordability crisis, that people who build affordable housing or people who want to purport to be on the right side of an issue don't want to talk about. So they don't want to talk about how building new housing as the only way to solve our housing crisis is environmentally disastrous. That we actually have to focus on the commodification of housing overall if we're going to be solving a crisis that's taking units off of the market actively. They only want to talk about adding new units. And so that was kind of like an uncomfortable truth to be talked about. I don't know if you wanted to add anything there, Kate.
Yeah, I think in terms of opposition on that one, that is really the nerve that we struck, is that, many good people, many folks that identify as liberals, as progressives, are, working diligently to try to solve the housing crisis in Portland by funding the building of affordable housing. And as we know, the low-income housing tax credits that come from the federal government and the subsidies that are available from the state and from the city, such as giving away our public land to be able to build these types of units. All of this stuff seems to be in the name of a good cause. However, it is one of the most inefficient systems that you can imagine. I mean, we build so little affordable housing and we take so much corporate welfare to do it. And though, at first these units are sold at below market value, ultimately that public land ends up in the hands of private developers and eventually becomes private. It becomes market rate housing. And so it's a boondoggle. And I don't think that many people understand it. And I think if they did, they would be marching in the streets against it. I mean, it takes tax dollars from the people who can least afford it. So as we know, we don't have a progressive tax structure in the United States. And so this money is coming directly out of the hands of middle-class working people. And who I'm sure want to make sure that no one is homeless in America, but should they pay for all of it? No.
Right, exactly. Well, it's so interesting to me because I mean, the housing crisis is very acute in Portland, but it's happening everywhere. And even now, especially during the pandemic, Maine is now, we are like this little haven, and so I mean, all over the state, I was even spending some time in Lubec, and all of a sudden, houses in Lubec that were affordable for the people who have lived and grown up in Lubec, all of a sudden, people are buying houses in Lubec from New York City, sight unseen, at twice their market value. And so, on the one hand, yay, great, we're glad that people want to be in Maine, but the lack of protections, I think, for people. So I think, again, the housing, minimum wage, all of this is like so common sense, and so what government, in my view, right, what government should do, protect people from the pirateers, right, that we used to call them back in the day. So talk a little bit. So I know that when the referendum came up, one of the oppositions that I heard to it was that we shouldn't do this by referendum. We should wait. We should let the city council do this. We should take more time. And So I always think of referenda as the failure of elected officials. Because I feel like it's when people feel they can't be heard by elected officials, that's when they decide to go ahead and do referenda. Is that a dynamic that you think was operating and the reason that you went to referenda?
Absolutely. And this gets to your question about the city council and who they represent. We have a council, like many municipalities, that essentially lives in corporate captivity. Their candidacy, whether or not they get elected, begins and ends with how much money they can raise from the Chamber of Commerce and from developers and people whose economic interests they can help to secure. And this also goes back to the issue around fundraising. We were outspent 40 to 1. The opposition raised, the final paperwork is going in this next week, but probably will be over $1 million. We raised about $30,000, and our funds came predominantly from unemployed people. My husband was actually the treasurer of the campaign, and we just sat and started filling out all of the information. And it is astounding the number of unemployed people who gave to our campaign. And so you begin to see the frustrations that the city council is not representing the people. The city council is representing the developers and the folks that stand to make so much money on the way that Portland is developing. So direct democracy, this was a process of direct democracy to take these issues to the people. It was ironic that we were accused of not having a quote unquote public process. I mean, that was one of the criticisms that was leveled against governing by referenda, is that there is quote unquote no public process. DSA is an open, we hold open public meetings. We consulted with many people in various industries that would be impacted by this, with labor unions, et cetera. And I mean, there is no more public process than actually speaking to people on the street. That certainly, right? Yeah, and collecting
the most public process there is, right?
Right. And I mean, it also, it just shows that, I mean, what the city council thinks is a public process is quote unquote public testimony, where you get up and you make your points about whatever issue is being legislated in the moment, and then the city council votes. And I mean, I've done that hundreds of times, and it is the most frustrating exercise because they don't listen. Yeah. There is no actual crafting of policy that happens back and forth between the public and the city council. It is simply, you go there and you cry and they don't listen.
Yeah. Well, so, and I want to ask you, so in that sort of divide or gulf between what clearly people support, right? And you saw that on all all your referendums, even the one that didn't pass, where the vast majority of people support them. And then there are the elected officials, some of whom are supportive, but many of whom are not. And in a democracy, and we see this at the state level, we see it at the national level, we see it with the Green New Deal nationally, we see it with Medicare for all, healthcare, housing, where literally 70–80% of the public on both sides of the aisle, however they identify politically, support these things. And yet, so in a democracy, right, in theory, right, this should then become the policy. But it doesn't work out that way. And I know you think about this a lot, Em, and I just wondered if you want to talk a little bit about what you think happens. What's the gulf? What's the missing? What's the divide that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see it nationally really in a stark contrast of, Republican or one man, Mitch McConnell, can block millions of Americans getting the help that they need. And you look at that and you say, is that actually a democracy? Is that actually functioning? And no, it's not, because our systems weren't set up by all of the people. They were set up specifically to block democratic access, to block and put a lot of measures in place so that people, working class people, Black people, women weren't enfranchised when we started this country. And the same systems apply locally. So it's not necessarily, our democracy isn't working. It's not working by design, because when you have the way of settling land that we did, I mean, it goes back to like white settler governments that were established in Maine that were not meant to be democratic. And then we had different kind of checks that are put in place to keep people away from power. So, I've thought about this a lot, because I, several years ago would say, oh, the process is bad. And maybe if we just gave more access to people, maybe if we made like nice online systems for engaging, that we'd get better decisions. And I've come to the realization, which is that you could have the best system ever, and unless you change how power works, it's not going to work. And so actual participatory governance means changing how power and how decisions are made so that people actually make decisions. Otherwise, it's just like a shiny veneer over a system that still disenfranchises people.
And so, Kate, do you think that means more referenda?
No, I think we need
It's a bad time to ask, but
no, I don't actually. I believe in government, and I believe that we can create a government that actually represents the people, which is why we are now, as People First Portland, pivoting towards the Charter Commission. So this is something that voters approved and in the spring, and it is something that we're now planning to elect people to sit on a commission to basically rewrite the constitution of our city. And that is about as big a deal as there can be. And so we are putting all of our resources right now into making sure that people understand what a charter is, why we need a different one, why we need to retool the one that we have, and who the right people are to sit on that commission in order to make sure that we get the results that we want. I mean, this will be another fight as big as the referenda. We know that the forces of capital are amassing to try to make sure that their interests are protected. And so we need another gigantic people's movement to make sure that we win at the ballot box. So we're starting to pivot to that now.
Wow, that's well. And so, do you feel like that? I think one of the things that I'm aware of is that all the things that allow for the kind of organizing and engagement that you were talking about, and you too, Kate. That I feel like it's heightened. I feel like we have more people engaged and more people understanding both how the system works and how it doesn't work. And those efforts towards, I was just talking yesterday with someone about, voting and voter engagement. And, I said, 2 years ago, nobody cared. Everyone was like, oh yeah, we should all be able to vote, but now it is like front and center, right? Because of 45 and what he's doing and trying to do, the access to voting and how it discriminates against, people generally, and is not listened to. And I think now we have to me, it seems like we have an open window or a space. And I think it sounds great for the Charter Commission where people are saying, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, I want my government back. I actually want my government to reflect me. And to me, it seems like more and more we're seeing that the divide between people, that we talk about how divided our state is and our country, it's not really so much right and left anymore. It's really up and down. It's really, and I think I would say it looks like that's what played out in your referendum. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it's like, who has the privilege of understanding our systems? And you see, like, the criticism of our referenda is no different than the criticism of almost any referenda. It's poorly written. They did it in secret. This is a bad process. They don't know what they're talking about. And essentially boils down to people can't govern themselves. We need these people we elect. We need these specialized master's degree, PhD folks to run everything. And we don't believe in the wisdom of the masses. And that's definitely an up and down thing. And I think every time we write things in a way that not many people can understand, anytime we shame people for not voting instead of actually asking them how to invite them into the process, we're not getting at the real problems, which is that, like, more people should have power, not fewer.
Not fewer, yeah.
Yeah, the statement that comes to mind is that democracy is a great idea until someone tries it.
Yeah.
I mean, the myth of American democracy is strong, and I think it's something that we hear so often from such a young age, and we have this conception of our democracy that, we want to spread this throughout the whole world, and it's used to justify so many wars and all of this stuff. I disagree that we should do away with the myth of democracy. I think we should tap into that, and it's it's something that crosses both the left and the right and the Republican and the Democrat lines. And as soon as we all start talking to each other, that's when the elites of this country will have something to worry about.
And I think they're starting to get worried now. I mean, I think that your referendum. So let me ask you a question. Just we're getting near the end here, but I just want to ask. So, do you think that it would be possible for most of these referenda that you passed in Portland? Do you think that they would that they have a statewide applicability? Like, do you think we could do? We already did minimum wage, not the exact same as yours, but similar. Do you think we could? Do you think this could work statewide? These kind of referenda?
I think that the model that works is our coalition.
Yeah.
And we built this with strong support from unions, from activist groups that are already working on the ground, like Southern Maine Workers Center had already been pushing for minimum wage years ago, and tacit support, but mostly just like a presence with the Portland Democrats. And that was helpful because they provided a stage and a place where people could learn about the referenda. But this wasn't a thing that was driven by the Dems, right? And I think that part is key. We had labor, we had racial justice activists, we had a really broad coalition of groups. And I think, and then pushing for policies that actually impact people's lives for the better. So I don't know that it's like run a slate of referenda statewide, which is a potential, or if it's looking at coalition building that really builds power outside of the party apparatus.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are unfortunately having to wrap up. I know we could talk for a long time. I am so grateful, and I think that it's so important. And for me, what I take hope from in this and the referenda is that, again, one more showing, one more example, one more huge example of how people on the ground agree on these very fundamental issues, and that we want government, as Kate, you were saying, we want government to be on our side. We want government to protect us from the people who would just like to make profit off of everything that we do and not care about their neighbors. And so it's such an incredibly hopeful sign in a time where there's, hope is pretty in short supply. So I just want to say thank you so much, both Kate and Em. And I know there was a huge group of people. And so please pass along our gratitude to the entire coalition of people. And we really look forward to seeing what you're doing next. You both are really precious gifts to the state of Maine. And we are so grateful for the work that you do and how much you put in. And to People First Portland for doing this work. So thank you for shining the way and sending a light ahead of us as we all try and follow in your good progressive footsteps. So thanks. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Maine Challenge, and big thanks to Kate and Em for joining us and for the good work that you do. We look forward to seeing what's next.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.